Hello, Jonathan Kirschner here. This is a podcast about leadership. I'm here with Jamie Ramsden. Jamie is a former CEO, a leadership advisor, and a close friend. And there's no one I can think of who I'd rather have this type of podcast session with than Jamie Ramsden. And so we're gonna cover a lot of ground, but there are three big areas we're gonna cover today: life, love, and leadership. Life, love, and leadership. Three small topics. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here on a podcast about leadership and being such a incredible, cherished friend. And it's really awesome to be on this journey with you.
Thank you.
Jamie does have his book here. Let's Go is how great leaders shape the future, which is such a beautiful title. And we'll obviously be touching on various aspects of that.
All right, let me ask you. What has failure taught you that success never could?
When you fail, you feel something, right? Like you feel it's rough, right? And but failure, to the extent that it goes examined and it becomes this learning opportunity, actually usually turns out to be the reason why something becomes so successful subsequently. And it's interesting. Like, I coach a lot of leaders. You coach a lot of leaders. I hire leaders. When I ask people about their greatest achievements, usually it sort of hatched from failure, which is really interesting, actually, right? So failure. What I've learned about failure is that it's a failure if you just sit on it, stew on it, and feel terrible, and then try to just move on. Then it's a failure. It becomes the impetus for success if it is examined and converted into a learning opportunity, and then it becomes a gem. And that's how I've experienced it. How about you?
Yeah, well, I think your point about defining what those words mean is a really valid one, because most of the people I work with, and if I think about my experience, let me just talk about my experience. Many of the external accomplishments that people would attribute to success, in inverted commas, they're multidimensional. It's not simplistic as, I won a medal and then my life was beautiful from that moment onwards. There's so much more complexity to, I think about my life, sort of becoming a chief exec at a fairly early age. But, so that could be a definition of success. But there were other things that happened that were, which made that outward appearance of success something less successful. So you wouldn't define it necessarily as failure. But I think the idea of just sort of saying failure and success seem to me to be very binary definitions. And I think that life is beautifully complex, and the human condition is beautifully complex. It's never one without the other. They're so close and integrated. And actually, it's the synthesis and integration of what is perceived as success or failure that leads to the kind of lifetime learning, the evolution of self. I haven't met anybody who didn't evolve as a human being who didn't have some kind of failure, some kind of issue that they had to integrate and learn from. And so if I'm, again, bring it back to my own experience, when I was a kid, I was really afraid of heights. I had a strong fear of heights. I didn't have much, but I was, anxious about. But heights was something that really bothered me. And so, in heights, in some people's, fear of heights is a fear of failure, like manifest. There's a connection or correlation between those two things, because they both involve failing. One is metaphorical, and the other one is quite physical. Falling.
Falling, right, falling.
Metaphysical, like in my life very early on. I remember going to the tallest roller coaster. I go with my friends to the tallest roller coaster in Europe at the time. It was in a place called Blackpool in England. And they all went on the thing and I didn't go because I was afraid. And they did 2 cycles and I was sitting here saying, what exactly are you afraid of? And it was a very visceral moment. I mean, at the time you don't really think about it, but when you look back, maybe it is more so. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go and do it. I'm just going to push myself. What's the worst that can happen and what am I going to do? And in that moment, like it got off at the end, I was like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Actually, it was quite fun. And I think that in my mind, that was, how you take something that is a fear of failure or a fear of, falling, and you overcome it in a very controlled manner. It wasn't like, I wasn't solo, sailing around the world. I was literally just getting on a roller coaster. But in that moment, in overcoming that, I think that really set a pathway for me to be able to say, when the next time you feel this same sense of feeling, just remember this moment and you can overcome it. And I think there's something in this failure, success. If you're not thinking about it in binary terms, most of life has lots of dimensions to it. And, and so the idea of being one or the other versus being a multiplicity of different dimensions around, an activity or an accomplishment that can include failure and success, I think that gives you a bit more freedom to be able to just go and explore.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you brought up another important topic, which is sort of like, in some ways, you got to take some risk, right? And you can't truly grow without taking some risk, without leaving your sphere of comfort. Now you can go too far. Yeah. You can take so there's a calculation. It's like I'm outside of my comfort zone, but close enough that I can take this risk. But ultimately, if I think about any growth, discontinuous growth experience, it comes about through taking some risk, right? Some measure of risk. And I think going back to failure, it's all about learning, right? That's what it is. If you don't orient with a learning mindset, then it truly becomes a failure, and then you probably avoid everything associated with that, right? But if you utilize learning, then you either go right back up at it or go right back up at it in a different way, or you clarify for yourself, you know what? That is not for me, but this is. And then you get more focused on something that is more core to your identity.
Yeah, it's like Edison's version of like, I failed 999 times to be able to succeed once.
To be able to,
that's a really tangible example of it.
So
let me ask you another question. When did you last feel genuinely lost?
When did I feel
Did the work save you, or was it the problem?
There's moments where we're heads down and executing and sometimes it goes the way you want it to go, and sometimes it goes a little sideways or you hit a bump, and then there's those moments where you're like, where am I? Who am I? Is this for me? And to me those are like, thankfully the few, but they happen, right? They happen, and usually, it is preceding an important developmental like milestone or decision, right? Where you sort of like, you're familiar with like the Erik Erikson's developmental framework. You can feel a little lost, right? You can feel a little lost. I imagine, if I could think about the time I had to let go of somebody, of an employee, right? The first time, I actually feel it all the time when I let go of an employee, but the first time I had to, part ways with someone, and I didn't sleep, and I was like in a huge amount of like distress about doing this, and it would like on paper it's absolutely clear, like this, this individual was not a fit. on just about every dimension that it would be required for a successful working relationship. And yet I couldn't get over the human, cost here. This would have an impact on the individual, obviously, their family. It would be hurtful. And I couldn't shake it. And it was really, really, really hard. But ultimately, underlying that was a dilemma, which was, am I solving for the broader organization and the business and what's best for the business, or am I solving for this individual and their needs? And then when you have that clarity, you do ultimately need to choose. And this is like one of the hardest things, by the way, I think, of being a leader. Because to be a leader, you have to love the people. But what does that really mean? Because if you truly love the people, you would never part ways with somebody, even if they were wildly underperforming or even hurting you. You would not part ways because you love them, and love in its extreme is unconditional, right? And so how do you be a human first leader and have compassion and love, and at the same time prioritize what's best for the business? Because ultimately leadership is actualizing a clear and compelling vision through others, right? It is moving worlds, it's mountains, to achieve something through others. And if you're CEO or you're a leader within the organization, your job is to move it. Your job is to actualize, right? Your job isn't to solve for the feelings of somebody. That doesn't mean you should be a jerk or uncompassionate, but it means the level of priority is, I have to do what's right for the business first, right? And that was like a really hard call. It brought up all sorts of like values that, and I had to reconcile with all of that. And once I made the decision, the next day, I'm like, wow, it feels a lot lighter. Everything is so clear right now. Still felt bad, right? How could you not? But I was unstuck. I was unstuck from that dilemma, and that those moments, you can think of as moments that matter. They become beyond clarifying. They become defining of your identity, and they happen. They don't happen all the time, but there are moments that really rub up on your values and force you to clarify and to define your identity and your path.
Yeah, I think it's something, that's I can relate to as well. It's like having been in that experience where you have to, you kind of have to make those calls, right? No one's going to make them for you. And you have to try and do things. I mean, you have to make decisions that are in the best interests of the majority of the people who you've been elected or nominated to represent. And that can be super challenging at times when you're in these moments where, you can see somebody's value, you can see that they're a human being, you can be compassionate and understanding, empathetic about who they are and what it can mean to them. And yet, you still have to make a call. And
you got to make the call. And you know what? This is the thing that they don't teach you. I mean, there's no school for leadership, right? I mean, you can go, get an MBA and take a class on leadership, but there's really no school for leadership. You sort of learn leadership by doing, having good mentors, and usually making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
So, I
coach.
Having a good coach that helps a lot.
Helpful.
Helps a lot. But yeah, I mean, I had a situation where I didn't let go of the person that I should have let go of, and the individual, such an amazing person, but wasn't delivering against expectations that were made clear. And we just said, let's just give it another quarter. Let's give it another quarter. It'll happen. It'll happen. Come on. And you know what happened? We ended up losing two of our best people because they said, if this is what performance is,
Right.
then I rather work in a place that appreciates my gifts, and that rewards me in kind. And it was a tough lesson.
Yeah, and I think I let that one the hard way, the same way, hanging
Yeah.
on to people. Most of the folks I work with will say the regrets that they had was not being able to make that decision sooner, because ultimately culture is what you tolerate, right? Somebody said that, but culture ends up being what you're prepared or willing to tolerate. And I think when I was really young in my career, in my tenure, I was more likely to try and give folks the benefit of the doubt and try and course correct. And I think sometimes your instincts develop over time where you can see where something's not working. You can still, and this is my framing, was that the way I justify their humanity is to treat them with compassion through the process, is to
Yes.
be empathetic to their needs, to be sympathetic to their situation, and to treat them with compassion, even if the decision is a hard one. And it can seem counterintuitive to say, well, if you love somebody, then you shouldn't, make bad decisions or give them the hard truths. But you can synthesize and integrate that. And it's about the how. It's about how you treat people. That doesn't change, even if you're giving them bad news.
Yes. But the hard part, you just backing up, like you shared, like ultimately you've got to make the call. In some ways, that's the fundamental difference between leading and following.
And it's not just about people, right? There are hard calls that we have to make about
Hard calls.
pricing, partnerships, entry into market, like, a product launch that you might say we made a mistake on. Like sometimes you have to back it out and say, okay, we made the wrong call and I'm responsible for the consequences of this.
Yeah.
And I'm prepared to just, make that decision and live with the consequences. That's the world that which most leaders live in, and it's not easy.
Yeah, not easy at all, and especially making a hard call when others disagree with you, even people that you have great respect for, but you still feel so much conviction, and in your heart of hearts this is the path. That's really hard. That's really hard. So much easier just to succumb to the groupthink and say, all right, fine, we won't do it.
Well, the one thing I know, when you become, responsible for lots of people, that means you end up with lots of decisions. There are a lot of voices. And so being able to center and ground yourself, know who you are, what do you want to accomplish, why are we here, how are we going to do it? It's really important to figure that out. And unfortunately, in many cases, the lag is that we figure that out after we've been in the role. And so when we're trying to open people's eyes in the work that we do to create self-awareness, is understanding yourself, what your values are, what you're not prepared to compromise on, what you're willing to accept, and how that defines in terms of secondary and tertiary consequences or secondary and tertiary impact on the culture and the people within the organization. Because as a leader, whether you're aware of it or not, you set the tone. It's in your actions. It's in the things that you say. It's in the things that you don't say. It's in the things that you do. And it's in the things that you don't do. And so, that magnifying glass is on, and, you should treat it with the respect it deserves.